With My Hero Academia's recent manga conclusion and Season 7 being absolute peak, we decided it was time to really dive deep into the series' ensemble cast. This is My Hero Academia characters good to evil. Before we begin, spoiler alert for the current season of the anime. But with that out of the way, we'll start as usual with the characters who have an unstoppable heroic sparkle. These characters are the good. Now, I hate to be quite so predictable, but there's no way we couldn't give the gold medal of good to Izuku Midoriya. It's not often that the main character of an anime is the cut and dry best character in terms of morals, but Deku is a pretty blatant example. His entire character throughout the course of the series has revolved around giving everything he has and then some for the sake of the people around him. This ranges from the first episode where he saved his at the time bully Bakugo from a giant villain to the current season where he's using his power of every one-for-all user to take down Shigaraki and at the same time trying desperately to find a way to do so without taking his life. Deku is the essence of a pure hero, and the absolute worst we could say about him is that he's far too overbearing on himself, which honestly just makes us place him even higher. Given the compassion he always shows the people around him, from pushing Todoroki to accept his power during the sports festival to encouraging Aoyama to be a hero despite his forced work as All for One's spy, Deku is the essence of a hero. From a self-sacrificing hero to the people he sacrifices for. Next we have an umbrella entry for Eri, Kota, and the other kids. This one should go without saying, really. Eri, Kota, and those kids from the MHA movies, whose names I totally didn't forget while narrating this, every last one of them is an innocent child in a world full of chaotic superpowers and characters. On top of being totally pure-hearted, they all try to stand up to villains they have zero chance of beating, whether it's Kota splashing muscular with water to distract him from killing Deku, or Eri willingly going back to Overhaul for a brief moment so he won't kill any more people. They're pure-hearted kids, so they're near the top of this list by proxy. Taking the bronze medal of good is the hero who wants to save 1,000,000 lives, Mirio Togata. Mirio is an absolute gem of a character in terms of both morals and writing. He's compassionate, positive, and always works hard to achieve his goals. Mirio is one of those few characters to sacrifice his quirk, his very means of becoming a hero, for the sake of defeating a villain. He helps take down Chisaki and save Eri, taking a literal quirk-destroying bullet for her to protect her from suffering any more pain. On top of being the ultimate big brother figure, Mirio doesn't give up after losing his quirk, still training as hard as he can, even while he's hospitalized. Later on, when Eri helps him get his quirk back, he joins in the final confrontation with Shigaraki using the absolute greatest surprise attack I've ever seen to distract him. Okay guys, hear me out. Floating on up to the next spot is Ochaka Uraraka. If you put Kirby and a bag of cotton candy in a blender, you might have something that comes close to as sweet as Ochaka here. Like Deku, she devotes herself wholeheartedly to the service of others. Although her motivation during the earlier seasons is to make money for her parents to live easier lives, it's revealed later that she does this primarily because she wants to see people of all kinds smile. She also worries about both heroes and villains, wondering who helps heroes when they need it, and even sympathizing with criminals like Himiko Toga, who we'll get to much later on. She gets extra points for that heartfelt speech she gave to the civilians who wouldn't let Deku into the UA fortress without her convincing them. Man, Season 6 background characters were jerks. But everything's okay, because All Might is here! It'd be a crime to place the former #1 hero any lower than the top 5. All Might saw potential in Deku because, like him, All Might is wholly self-sacrificial, using everything he has and then some for the sake of others. And when I say and then some, I mean and then some. After his initial fight with All for One, his former sidekick Sir Night-Eye, who can literally see the future, tells him that if he continues being a hero with his injuries, he'll meet an unspeakably gruesome death. To this warning, All Might naturally listens to his old friend and retires, and psych, he's still a hero for years to come, even using the very last of One for All's embers to beat the crap out of All for One again. If there's one guy who embodies plus ultra, it's All Might, no question about it. That said, while All Might is pretty close to the embodiment of good, he's not perfect. He isn't a flawless teacher to Midoriya, often allowing him to follow All Might's own reckless, self-destructive tendencies. Still, any shortcomings All Might might have are more than made up for by the sheer dedication he has to his work as a hero, keeping him at a super high spot on our list. But even the greatest heroes have their physical limits, and that's exactly why they need Recovery Girl. Acting as UA's school nurse, Recovery Girl has the ability to heal students with her kisses, a power without which Deku would have died like 10 times in the first few seasons. She might not be fighting on the front lines, but Recovery Girl is an invaluable member to Hero Society. May God help UA once she's gone. Let's give a quick shout out to Star and Stripe, the #1 hero in the good old USA. She went against the word of her superiors to fight Shigaraki herself, showing that she's willing to endanger both herself and her career for the good of society as a whole. Despite her untimely demise, Star was able to destroy some of Shiki's quirks from the inside, meaning her sacrifice wasn't totally in vain. I think I speak for everyone when I say that this girl deserved way more screen time, but at least she was responsible for one of the best fights in this series' history, right? But now let's move from America to another non-Japan country, a more magnifique one. That's right, next up is the man with the unstoppable twinkle, Yuga Aoyama. Putting Aoyama even higher than we did last time is sure to be a controversial choice, and it's totally not one made just because he's the scriptwriter's favorite character or anything. That's just part of it. But let's get to the elephant in the room. Season 7 revealed that Yuga was the spy who had been leaking the locations of various training sessions to the villains. As horrible as this sounds, he was literally forced into this, being born quirkless and given naval laser at a young age by All For One thanks to his parents. He was given two choices: either leak information to All For One whenever he asked for it, or have his parents brutally massacred in front of him. He experienced all this as a child, mind you, but despite the clear danger both he and his family were under, Yuga rescued Tokoyami and almost rescued Bakugo from Mr. Compress at the training camp, working against All For One by proxy, attempted to fail various tests at UA to get kicked so he wouldn't be able to help All For One, or have his parents killed. In the Heroes Rising movie, used his laser as a distraction against 9 so his friends could escape, and ultimately helped in the war against All For One, landing the very first attack on him and proving his loyalty to both his friends and his dedication to protecting his dear papa and maman. Like Deku, Aoyama always dreamt of being a hero who shows compassion and generosity to others from a young age, and despite a rough road, he's more than achieved that. But most importantly, he does all of it with an unstoppable sparkle and a lot of cheese. Anyone want some cheese? It wasn't rhetorical. Have some cheese. Closing up the top 10 is another 1A student forced to wear a mask, but for Meizo Shoji, that was literal. What Shoji lacks in screen time, he more than makes up for in sheer heroic deeds. Shoji dedicates himself to the well-being of those around him, most notably during the training camp arc. Had he not carried Deku after his fight with Muscular, our protagonist would probably be less one for all and more done for all. Not to mention his determination to help stop Tokoyami's rampaging Dark Shadow. In Season 7, Shoji finally gets some time in the spotlight. It's revealed that he was the victim of mutant racism, but despite this, he managed to choose a path of heroism rather than vengeance. He even risked his life to save a little girl from drowning, causing her, and maybe us, to cry because of everything he'd been through. Shoji overcame brutal, unjust treatment and came through it a genuinely great hero, proving that he deserves respect as one of MHA's greatest heroes. And as long as we're talking about Shoji, we might as well go ahead and mention Koji Koda. While he plays a secondary role to his buddy Shoji, Koda finally gets some spotlight of his own during the duo's fight against Spinner, and I'm not sure when these guys were a duo before, but it's nice to see him actually get to do something for once. He even gets a quirk awakening and fights for the sake of Shoji and his convictions. This actually reminds me of the first time Koda got spotlight. Remember in the final exams arc when he overcame his fear of bugs solely because he wanted to help Jiro? That alone proves that Koda is motivated by the well-being of others more than anything. Let's get back to the characters who have been through it category with Shoto Todoroki. He might have seemed like a bit of a jerk earlier on in the series, but given what Shoto's been through, it's hard to blame him. This guy was beaten by his father and literally scarred by his mother, all because his father saw him as a pawn for his delusional ambition. It's a miracle he didn't go down the same route as one of Endeavor's other sons, frankly. With that being said, the fact that Shoto decided to walk the path of heroism is that much more admirable. While Shoto can still be quite blunt, this is almost always a good quality. He's willing to stick up for his friends and do what's right, even if it means rebelling against the chief of police for implying the kids didn't do the right thing by defeating Stain. He develops over the course of the series into his own compassionate hero, no longer bound by his admittedly justified hatred of his father. While he refuses to let Dabi hurt any more people, he acknowledges the horrors he's been through and still expresses that he genuinely wants to build some kind of connection with him, which is a pretty generous thing to do for someone who's trying to kill all your loved ones. We've talked about plenty of manly dudes so far, but it's hard to compare to Eijiro Kirishima in that regard. Pun intended, of course. With a quirk like hardening, Kirishima was tailor-made for protecting the innocent, and that's something he does whenever he can. He's always willing to put himself in harm's way for the sake of others, and is one of the most dedicated hero trainees at UA. On top of being one of the few students patient enough to be close friends with Bakugo, Kirishima is a compassionate and dedicated hero who cares genuinely for everybody around him. For one major example, when Aoyama is exposed as UA's spy, Kirishima is one of the first to comfort him and assure him that he's forgiven. Red Riot is a man among men, and like 90% of Class 1A, he's basically the sheer essence of a good hero. And since we just talked about one of his interns, let's give Fat Gum a high spot on our list. With a quirk that relies on him being morbidly obese, Fat is definitely the only choice we could make for the Gluttony Center medal, but that doesn't stop him from being a pretty great guy. Like Kirishima, Fat Gum is a positive, encouraging hero who always works to push his students forward, as seen by his heartfelt bond with Tamaki. At the same time, he'll do whatever he can to protect them. He took an intense beating from Rappa to protect Kirishima, and in Season 7, he works together with Aoyama to fight Kuneda, even telling him he did a great job. Fat Gum's an absolute gem, and one of those characters you can't help but love. Next, we have his sidekick, Tamaki Amajiki. With one of the absolute coolest quirks in the series, despite one of the most fragile egos, Sun Eater is one of the hardest working heroes at UA. Despite his anxiety, he always works hard as an aspiring hero, which earns him some extra good guy points in our book. We're actually going to give Tamaki even more points for his role in Season 7, because it's revealed that he's the one who reached out to Nejire to befriend her, just like Mirio reached out to him much earlier. It's a sweet moment, and shows that Tamaki is willing to work pretty hard to make others feel safe, and that's not to mention him being able to land a pretty impressive hit on Shigaraki during the final battle. It's just, you know, a shame that he didn't do much of anything. And let's just go ahead and round out the big three with Nejire Hado. While she's by far the least fleshed out member of the three, Nejire is as kind and hardworking as her friends. She can admittedly be a little bit nosy, like asking Shoto where he got his scar or Shoji why he wears a mask, but that's far from a huge moral failing, really. The big three have definitely earned their place on UA's podium of good, and Nejire is no exception. Hopefully the next entry won't shock you too bad. It's our favorite glorified phone charger, Denki Kaminari. More or less the straight man of Class 1A, Kaminari is characterized by being one of the more friendly, laid-back students. He gets along well with just about everyone and is always shown to be one of the most thoughtful of the young heroes. From practicing a guitar until his fingers bleed to support Jiro's performance during the UA school festival to sticking up for Bakugo and Kirishima during the licensing exam, Kaminari is one of the simplest characters in the series, but one of the most endearing. He's just a great friend, and sometimes that's all you need to be. That said, he does have one flaw that we have to mention. Occasionally he goes along with Mineta's perverted schemes to look at the girls in skimpy outfits, but being a teenage boy who's attracted to teenage girls is hardly an egregious sin, right? At least he isn't trying to climb over a massive wall to look at them naked. Frickin' grape juice. Zooming into the next spot is a successor to the turbo hero Ingenium, Tenya Ida has earned our respect, which really shouldn't be too surprising. I mean, he even got the respect of literal serial killer Stain during the final war, and rightly so. Ida's greatest moral failing was in Season 2 when he went after Stain in an attempt to avenge his handicapped older brother, but while that wasn't legal, it also isn't something we can blame him too much for. Like, Stain is a mass murderer, dude. Even if Ida's motives weren't in the right place, he wasn't really doing anything wrong by going after him. And further still, even if he was, his good traits still far outweigh his bad ones. While he does seem a bit rigid early on, he quickly warms up to Midoriya and the rest of the class. Despite his strict adherence to the rules, Ida is as kind as he is strict. As class president, he makes sure that nobody in 1A is left behind. This is most notably shown through his friendship with Yuga, who he reaches out to during the licensing exam and supports the student's decision to forgive and support him during the spy reveal arc. There's also his connection to Shoto, who he supports during his conflict with Dabi in the final war, and in the process, he finally earns the acknowledgement of Stain. Not that I feel he'd care much about that. Ida is a reliable guy through and through, and the only reason he isn't any higher is the fact that there are just so many heroes in the series, man. Hopping right along, let's talk about Tsuyu Asui. Characterized by a mix of sometimes brutal honesty and sincere kind-heartedness, Tsuyu is one of 1A's less complex characters. While her bluntness can come off as harsh, like when she implies that her classmates wouldn't be any better than the villains if they want to rescue Bakugo from the League, it's understandable for a high school hero in training to have some bad takes. At the end of the day, Tsu is always a reliable friend to her class, especially Ochako, who she supports wholeheartedly throughout the series. Local dance instructor and alien movie enthusiast Mina Ashiro is next. Mina, like Denki, is one of the less complex students at UA. While she isn't one of the smarter students, she's a skilled fighter and dancer, and both of these talents help her friends out at various points in the series. Her biggest role was probably taking on the challenge of teaching half of the class to dance for the school festival performance, but while that was when she got the most screen time, I think her most heroic deed was actually before she even attended UA. It's revealed in Season 4 that Mina and Kirishima attended the same middle school, and she played a major role in inspiring him to be a courageous hero. When Gigantomachia asked where a local hero agency was, Mina stepped in between him and the two other girls to give him wrong directions so he wouldn't hurt them. Showing that kind of courage before even starting her time at UA is impressive, so kudos for that, and even more for helping take down some serious bad guys during the final war. He may be a disciple of the Abyss, but don't be fooled. Tsunikage Tokoyami is a true blue black hero. Edgy though he may be, Tokoyami does whatever he can to control his dangerous familiar, Dark Shadow, and use him to protect others rather than harm them. When his friends are in danger, Tokoyami will go all out to make sure they're protected. During his fight with Slice in the Heroes Rising movie, Ashiro gets hit by one of the latter's hair needles, which wins her a one-way ticket to a classic Dark Shadow rampage. In Season 6, Tokoyami also manages to break free of Fat Gum's fat taxi service to go rescue Hawks from being murdered by Dabi, showing that he's willing to defy authority if it means protecting his friends. I guess that makes him more of a chaotic good character than anything else, but in any case, he's proof that you can't judge a book by its cover. Next up is resident rich girl Momo Yaoyorozu. Despite having a nearly limitless quirk able to create any object she understands the chemical makeup of, Yaoyorozu often overthinks her course of action and as a result struggles with her self-confidence in the beginning of the series. But as time goes on, she overcomes this struggle and becomes more self-assured. In Season 6, she even leads the UA students in taking down Gigantomachia, even if the sedative takes longer to work than she expected. What's cooler than a hero? A hero who can sing. Enter Kyoka Jiro. Jiro is one of the most underrated side characters in Class 1A. While she's the class's resident grumpy punk rock girl, Jiro is surprisingly caring. During her first semester final exams with Koda, Jiro encourages him to overcome his fear of bugs to pass the test. Later in Season 7, she gets her most badass screen time yet when she helps in the fight against All For One, during which she not only loses an ear in the process, but gets so angry at the horrors Deku and Aoyama have witnessed by facing All For One that she bursts into tears. The worst we could say about Jiro is her teasing of Kaminari, which, say it with me, isn't really a huge moral failing. We're almost done with Class 1A's fully good guys, so let's talk about the few who really don't have much in terms of impactful screen time. Mashira, Ojiro, Hanta Sero, Rikido Sato, and Toru Hagakure. We're ranking these four together since they don't really have significant story arcs in the story, but they're every bit as heroic as their classmates, and they get moments to shine here and there. Actually, that's literal for Hagakure. Those combo moves with Aoyama are going places, girl. Alright, enough students for now. Let's talk about a character who's easy to forget. Yoichi Shigaraki. Not to be confused with the other prominent Shigaraki, Yoichi is the younger brother of All for One, and as a result, he's also the yin to his brother's yang, being the first wielder of One for All. Within Deku's subconscious mind, he helps guide him towards making the right decisions and completing the power they've been forging for generations. Next up is Melissa Shield from the first movie, Two Heroes. Melissa is a quirkless girl who devotes her life to helping heroes via support items and research. In doing so, she ends up making some gauntlets that allow Deku to use higher percentages of One for All's power without hurting himself too badly, which will surely be a really invaluable contribution, as long as it isn't for some reason completely ignored after its introduction. Mountain Lady is a character who earned a lot more of my respect over the course of the series. Initially, she's portrayed as one of the least admirable pro-heroes. She steals work from others, flirts her way into free meals, and even uses her student interns as maids, apparently leaving Mineta completely traumatized, although to be fair, knowing Mineta, that probably was the right thing to do. In any case, Mountain Lady has a bit of a redemption arc over the course of the series. She works in the fight against All for One to rescue Bakugo in Season 3, plays a huge role in the First War trying to hold back Gigantomachia, and after the downfall of public opinions on heroes in Season 6, she's one of the few major pros who stays in the game, showing that she really does care about helping people more than ensuring that she's popular. Now, we definitely could have put Inko Midoriya higher on our list. She's a great mom, encouraging Izuku to pursue his dreams while still insisting that he stay as safe as he can, but given just how many heroes there are to talk about today, we have to give the people who are objectively saving lives on a regular basis an upper hand. Still, being a mom is important. If only Deku's dad were so devoted, right? Next is another Class 1A mom, Rei Todoroki. While she isn't perfect by any means, she's by far the less problematic of Shoto's parents, and is also the victim of a society that allows arranged quirk marriages to exist. Rei wasn't able to parent her children as well as she wanted to, especially in regard to Toya, but this was mostly due to the trauma she suffered thanks to her husband's abuse. That's not to say that she's a bad parent. She does encourage Shoto to pursue his dreams of becoming a hero, and later rallies the family to defeat her wayward eldest son. The Todoroki family may be hellish, but Rei isn't the worst offender, not by a long shot. Next, we have the inventor of the weirdest form of CPR I've ever heard of, Edge Shot. Being a top hero, his placement in the good mostly speaks for itself, but he deserves special mention for his role in Season 7, where he more or less gives up like 95% of his body to become Bakugo's heart. Yeah, don't think about that too hard. Just know he was willing to potentially die to save his friend's intern. Speaking of said friend, next up is Best Jeanist. Of course, given that he's a top tier hero, his placement almost goes without saying, but Best Jeanist is willing to go through a lot. Like, the guy went through a surgery that deliberately made him appear to be dead for months just to get Hawks into the post-liberation front as a double agent. And after a too short recovery period, he still came back to help in the final battle. As morally questionable as the methods were, that's some serious dedication. Let's make some noise for UA's beloved announcer, present Mike. Acting as one of UA's many teachers, Mike is one of the many pros who fights against evil. He does have a temper, but it only comes out when he's faced with some seriously messed up stuff, like when he punched the elderly Dr. Yujiko for all the crimes against humanity he'd committed. Mike is a loyal friend to Aizawa and a dedicated teacher to his students, earning him a decent spot on the list. And like it or not, it's only rational for us to give Shoto Aizawa a place in the good category. Aizawa is the homeroom teacher of Class 1A, and he might seem at first glance to be an absolutely ruthless educator. He threatens expulsion on a regular basis to keep them in line, and Aizawa is the homeroom teacher of Class 1A, and he might seem at first glance to be an absolutely ruthless educator. He threatens expulsion on a regular basis to keep them in line, and on at least one occasion threatened to expel 17 out of the 20 members of Class 1A. But while he may be harsh at times, everything Eraserhead does is for the sake of protecting his students. Given his and Mike's trauma over losing their childhood friend on the job, Eraser works extra hard to keep his students safe so they won't suffer the same fate. Additionally, he works to keep them from falling down darker paths. We saw this during his conversation with Aoyama in Season 7. He not only pardoned him given the situation, but he offered him the shot at redemption he needed via a plan to lure All for One to their battleground. He can also be compassionate. In Season 4, after the death of Sir Nidai, he comforts a crying Ochako and assures her that she's done all she could, telling her to let the grown-ups bear the burdens. That motto really summarizes Aizawa's character. Frankly, he just wants to make a world where the adults can carry the burdens for the kids, so eventually there will be fewer of them. And if you're still not convinced of his soft side, look no further than his training of Hitoshi Shinso. Admittedly, the guy's brainwashing quirk requires him to use underhanded means to get the drop on his enemies, but come on. If we place him outside of the good area for that, we'd be missing the point of his arc entirely. He's not the friendliest guy around, but Shinso is always down to help his fellow students. In Season 7, he helps Aoyama and his parents lure All for One to to their predetermined location, offering a double thumbs up of encouragement in the process. Shinzo might not have come to UA to make friends, but it doesn't seem like he'll be able to avoid it. Sorry Shinzo, you're just too dang likable. But with that, we've reached the end of our admittedly massive good section. Now it's time to start on the more questionable characters. This is the gray area. First up is another one of the cutest characters in the series, Principal Nezu. Nezu is interesting. He seems to have some seriously sketchy feelings towards humans. During Class 1A's final exams, he takes the opportunity of their teachers versus students testing model to attack Mina and Kaminari ruthlessly, laughing like a maniac all the while. Despite his understandable grudge against humans, since he was once experimented on by them, these kids had nothing to do with that, Nezu. In any case, he still gets a lot of points for his genuine care for UA High. He convinced his superiors to let the students have a school festival despite the dangers, and spent millions of his own money to amp up UA's defenses before the final battle. As they say, every mouse/bear/dog has its day. Up next we have support course legend Mei Hatsume. She might not be part of the hero course, but Mei is invaluable in her own way. She devotes herself to creating support items that'll help the heroes in their work, and she is very efficient at doing so, with items so powerful they nearly kill the heroes she tests them out on. Mei is definitely one of UA's more chaotic characters, and we can't forget the time when she basically abused poor Ida into advertising her babies during the sports festival. Get that bread, Mei, but don't disrespect Ida while you do it. On the topic of disrespect, next up is Class 1B's Neto Monoma. Class 1B has just as many students as 1A, but we'd feel redundant mentioning most of them since they really are just more hero trainees with less screen time. Monoma is unique, however. He's a jerk, well, kinda. The guy's incredibly arrogant, taking any opportunity he can to insult Class 1A. On one hand, that means he's always hyping up his own class, but on the other, he's discouraging to pretty much everyone else. In his own way, though, Monoma is just another kid trying to learn how to be a proper hero. He desperately wants to be a hero despite not believing he's capable of doing so, but in Season 7, when he's able to copy Kurogiri's quirk to warp the heroes and villains where they need to go for the final battle, he proves himself every bit as worthy of the spotlight as his peers. He also seems to be decent with kids, shown by his willingness to at least try and help Eddie master her quirk, even if it didn't work out. He's a good guy deep down, he just needs to work on that smugness a little bit. Following him is a student from another school, Inasa Yoarashi. Inasa is a friendly, upbeat wind manipulator who goes to Shiketsu High School. He's the first to pass a provisional license exam, showcasing some extreme power, and in the same arc a serious grudge against Shoto for, hold on, let me check my notes. Oh yeah, being kind of rude to him at their UA entrance exam. I mean, they both get humbled enough to work on improving themselves and their cooperation skills after they failed the licensing exam, but it was still petty for Inasa to hold such a grudge against Shoto for that. Now let's look at the third movie to talk about Rody Soul. Rody isn't a cut and dry hero, but he's also a victim of circumstance. When his family was ostracized for his father's involvement with Humorize, Rody did what he had to do in order to provide for his little siblings, which sadly meant plenty of theft. Given how he was able to flee from Deku for a while, it's safe to say that he's committed his fair share of petty crimes. In the end, though, he comes around and helps Deku take down Humorize when he learns that they forced his dad to help build their horrible mutant bomb thingies. He helped a lot of people in the end, which is more than enough to make up for some occasional theft. Next up, we have the guy whose main claim to fame is being the first major death in the series, Sir Night-Eye. A former sidekick of All Might, not to mention a close personal friend, Night-Eye used his quirk to help All Might avoid leaping into danger. Regrettably, All Might often neglected to listen, or at the very least cared more about saving people than he cared for himself. This led to their split up, and while Night-Eye was still a hard-working hero, he was also kind of a jerk. When Deku laments his inability to help Eddie, Deku being a teenager, mind you, Sir Night-Eye basically tells him to stop being self-centered, which shows an occasional lack of empathy on his part. Oh, yeah, he also has this weird tickle torture machine thing that he hooks up to his college-aged female sidekick too. No, I'm not gonna pretend that isn't weird, but what the heck, Night-Eye? Still, props to him for encouraging Mirio and Deku in his dying moments. We've seen a lot of determined pros today, but none compared to Marko in that regard. Seriously, this girl's been mutilated multiple times, despite only really showing up in the 2 latest seasons, and she's still fighting hard. Her determination is admirable, but the reason we place her in the gray area is because, well, while she's on the side of good, she's more neutral than many of the other pros in terms of morals. That's basically why everyone in the gray so far is here, really. They aren't really bad people by any means, but rather more indifferent characters who happen to be doing a lot of good in their line of work. But now it's time to get into the really questionable characters, starting with Hawk. The current number 2 hero, Hawks is a speed-oriented hero who wants to make a world where heroes have time to kick back and relax here and there. He's a laid-back dude who gives his all, but unfortunately his role in hero society leads to him doing some shady stuff. The first example of this, chronologically at least, was him using Tokoyami for information during his first work study. As revealed later on, Hawks chose him for 2 reasons. He's a bird person, and he has information about the League of Villains' attack back in Season 1. While he made up for this later, that was kind of a jerk move, but it's sadly nothing compared to the difficult task he took later on. In Season 5, Hawks joins the Post-Liberation Front as a double agent, faking the death of best genists to gain their trust. During his time there, he earns the trust and friendship of Twice, only to end up betraying him when the heroes attack. Hawks does offer Twice a choice to come quietly, but when the latter refuses to betray his friends, Hawks sees no option but to kill Twice. On one hand, this is somewhat understandable. Even dealing with one Shigaraki took all the strongest heroes to fight him, let alone beat him. If they'd had like 20 Shigarakis, the Earth would have just disintegrated in seconds. But on the other hand, this is still the first example of full-on murder we've seen on the list so far, and it's murder of a guy who, while undoubtedly a villain, had the capacity to eventually reform his ways after getting some help. It was a tragic situation to be sure, but one that we have to take serious points away from Hawks for. Up next is Mitsuki Bakugo. What Katsuki Bakugo's mother lacks in screen time, she more than makes up for in just how much she indirectly reveals about everyone's favorite ticking teenage time bomb. I mean, she really responded to her son being very recently kidnapped by villains by saying that if he'd been stronger, he wouldn't have been captured. Still, there are worse things you could do for your kid than excessively scolding them, like just a random example here. At least she didn't get Katsuki involved with a superpowered crime lord. Next, we have to mention Mr. and Mrs. Aoyama. When this rich French couple found out their baby was born quirkless, they met with the only man rumored to be able to give out quirks, All For One. Unfortunately, this would result in their son being used as a pawn for All For One since his early childhood, and having severe stomach pains too. Of course, Yuga's parents do sincerely love him, and as a result, they obviously didn't mean to get him involved with the most ruthless crime lord in all of Japan, but when their lives were threatened unless they cooperated, they continuously begged Yuga to save the family from destruction, actively putting him under more of a burden than anyone should be under, let alone a kid. They aren't all bad, but these two might be the dumbest parents in this entire series. From one couple to another, next is Gentle Criminal and La Brava. Now before you call Chris Hansen, La Brava is 21 and Gentle is in his early 30s. This means that not only is there no grooming going on here, but they can be tried as adults for their crimes, which, to be fair, mostly involve petty theft and various stunts to get their views up. Their dedication to each other is strong no matter what. La Brava is head over heels for Gentle, and Gentle is more than willing to give himself up for her sake. After being beaten by Deku, he tries to take all the blame for the pair's crimes. Later on, Gentle and La Brava's redemption comes full circle when the two help keep the UA fortress in the sky during the final battle, showing that their hearts are heroic at the end of the day. Heck, even during their villain arc, Gentle only became a villain due to his being expelled from school after an attempt to save a man's life went awry. His story started with the failure to be a hero and ended with a rousing success. Now that's some good content, Gentle. I wonder what they're gonna call him from now on though, like Gentle Freedom Fighter? Gentle Decent Guy? I don't know. Next up is Midnight. Upon her introduction at the sports festival, Kirishima says something along the lines of, "Isn't it weird that they let her work at high school?" And to answer that question, yes, Kirishima, it is weird. The lady literally licks her lips and swoons when she watches these minors fight each other, even more so when she gets to fight them herself. Who is this? She's Soka's cousin? I get that her whole thing is seduction, but she's literally getting turned on by watching children get hurt. If she weren't saving lives, she'd be way lower on our list, but despite her interests, she is a decent teacher who does her best to guide the students. That said, telling a Kaminari he knew what he was signing up for, you know, the 16-year-old kid forced into a war, that was a messed up thing to say. Midnight was kind of a jerk. RIP, though. All Might's deceased mentor Nana Shimura is next. Shimura is the one who passed One for All down to All Might, so we have to give her credit for teaching the greatest hero Japan ever saw how to fight for the side of justice. Not to mention the lives she saved. She continues to guide Deku in his subconscious mind alongside the other One for All vestiges. That said, we have to dock her some serious points for her abandonment of her son Kotaro, which, as we'll see later, would have dire consequences for his whole family. She isn't a psychic, I know, but dangerous hero work or not, there's no excuse for abandoning your kid. I guess there were worse ways to do it than placing him in foster care, but still not cool, Nana. Following Shimura is her dear friend Gran Torino. Working in close contact with All Might, Shimura, and Deku much later, Gran Torino takes his job as a pro seriously. Despite being retired, his devotion to the cause of protecting society is commendable even if his methods of training are pretty brutal. Seriously, if you think UA's hero training looks tough, I feel like Gran Torino would make it look like a cakewalk in comparison. The guy really didn't let All Might rest for a second, huh? And the same went for Deku. Gran Torino's a great mentor who helped his students stop injuring himself, which is definitely worth a lot of points. It's a shame he was knocked out of commission in the first war, huh? Now we finally reached the most popular character, to my chagrin, Katsuki Bakugo. Kacchan here hardly needs any introduction. Bakugo is Deku's childhood best friend, childhood bully, and arch rival, all wrapped up into one explosive, loudmouthed package. Being told from an early age that his quirk was incredible gave Katsuki a serious superiority complex, causing him to bully Deku relentlessly for his lack of a quirk. Heck, he's the one who came up with that nickname as an insult in the first place. Of course, Bakugo has his reasons for holding a grudge against Deku for such a long time. You see, when the two were very young, Bakugo fell down, and Deku helped him up. up, and Bakugo didn't like that because he's better than Deku. And, oh god, this kid is a jerk. The Pride Center medal could go to nobody else. But despite his first impression being one of the worst in the whole series, Bakugo does manage to slowly but surely redeem himself over the course of the series. Desperate to prove himself superior to his old quirkless buddy finally having power of his own, Bakugo is forced to confront his own weaknesses during his time at UA High. I mean, he never becomes the spitting image of a pure-hearted hero. He's constantly rude to civilians and potential fans, tends to jump to threats of murder remarkably fast, and thinks extremely little of the majority of his classmates. That said, he does learn to treat others with something adjacent to basic human decency eventually, and he even finally apologizes to Deku in Season 6. It's the absolute bare minimum, yeah, but at least he's growing as a young hero should, right? Bakugo isn't all bad, he's just a massive jerk, and he's got a lot of growing to do still. But as for the least good member of Class 1A, yeah, it's gotta be Minoru Mineta. If you're familiar with the show on any level, I'm sure you know why Mineta is here. In the earlier seasons, he's the primary comic relief of the show, and I put that lightly, acting as the resident pervert character who spends most of his screen time groping or peeping on his female classmates. Despite his ego and how quick he is to accuse other people of being perverted, Mineta is the character who takes the Lost Sinner medal and sticks to it harder than his quirk does. While Mineta is indeed training to be a superhero and has saved people by proxy, he's openly stated that he wants to be a hero primarily to get popular, specifically to hook up with hot chicks. He does occasionally showcase some selflessness. He's friendly with some of the students of Class 1A, and in the final battle in Season 7, he offers his own quirk to All For One to distract him so he won't steal Dark Shadow from Tokoyami. He's at least matured a little bit. We'll definitely give him that. Now let's talk about another sorta kind of villain, David Shield. As a good friend and former sidekick to All Might, David is the definition of a ride or die. While he learned that All Might's power was fading, he worked day and night researching ways to remedy this. Unfortunately, scientists concluded his research was too dangerous and confiscated it. Were this the end of the story, it would be tragic, but he wouldn't be quite so low. Unfortunately, David was so determined to use his research to help an old friend that he resorted to hiring fake villains to attack Island as a distraction, blatantly endangering the people therein, including his own daughter. He might have been well-intentioned, but the danger he put the general public in is too strong to ignore. One more reformed villain is next. Lady Nagant made her mark in the latter half of Season 6 during a pretty epic fight with Deku. Like Hawks, she was effectively groomed into hero work by the Hero Commission, built up from a young age to become an assassin. Now, it's not a secret that Hero Society has a pretty shady underbelly, and when Nagant found out the full extent of it, she reacted by murdering a superior, leading to a life of crime that resulted in her being placed in a top-security prison. Tragically, she was led astray again by All For One, commissioned once again as an assassin to take down Deku. She ultimately atoned and helped in the final fight against All For One like gentle criminal, but given the gravity of her former crimes, which she did willfully commit, we have to place her a good bit lower. Let's give a quick mention to Madam President, the now deceased leader of the Hero Public Safety Commission. As the main figurehead of the corrupt Hero Commission, she was always willing to do some pretty sleazy stuff for the sake of society as a whole. This includes, most notoriously, placing heroes in training like the kids at UA in dangerous situations, from work studies during times of war to enlisting said kids in war. Despite a lack of screen time, she has more than enough impact on the story to warrant a pretty low place on our list. Though, if there's any character who outright screams low gray area, it's Endeavor. For the first 3 seasons, Endeavor's arc is centered around his desperate ambition to become the #1 hero. This earns him the Envy Sinner medal because every aspect of Endeavor's life is built around this, from arranging a marriage with Rei, a lady with a strong ice quirk, to having kids like their business opportunities. But his worst parenting trait was, most notoriously, abusing Shoto, his youngest son, who he finally considered the perfect ball of clay to mold into a hero who could surpass All Might. That's not even mentioning what he did to his eldest son Toya, who you might also recognize as the League of Villains' source of literal firepower, Dabi. Despite training him from a young age due to his strong fire, Endeavor stripped Toya's dreams of greatness once he realized his body wasn't resistant to his own fire. How he didn't see this potential issue coming is beyond me. But despite everything else about Endeavor's motivations, he has saved a ton of lives, which has to earn him a decent amount of hero points to keep him out of the bad category. Still, the bad in Endeavor is, like, really bad, and thankfully he acknowledges this. Throughout the 5th and 6th seasons, Endeavor takes full accountability for his actions, apologizing to his family for his horrific sins and being wholeheartedly devoted to stopping his son's murderous rampage. He even recognizes that he isn't going to be automatically forgiven because he's trying to atone, which shows that he's sincerely remorseful for his actions. Finally, a good celebrity apology! Closing out the gray area, and this is a bit of a weird choice, but it's the hero killer, Stain. Stain is a serial killer. Yeah, I know it doesn't seem like the gray area is the right place for him, but just hear me out. While Stain has killed plenty of innocent heroes, not to mention those he wounded, he did so also out of sincere conviction over how corrupt hero society has become. If characters like Hawks and Nagant were any indication, Stain was kind of onto something. Not that it even comes close to justifying mass murder though. In fact, he gets it pretty wrong sometimes. Like, why did he attack Inganium of all people? The guy's like the embodiment of a by-the-book, morally upright hero. I get the Stain is a major simp for All Might, but that doesn't mean nobody else is good. Go after Endeavor, or the multiple women lusting after teenagers if you have to teach some pros a lesson, dude. The only thing saving Stain from a spot in the bad category are his actions in Season 6 and 7. Near the end of Season 7, Stain is one of the many villains who escapes from prison, at which point we see him take out a criminal who was determined to assault some women as soon as he got out. He grabs sensitive information about All For One and Shigaraki and gives it to All Might, which allows the heroes to plan their final battle to the best extent they can. And in a surprising turn of events, he even ends up helping All Might in his final battle against All For One, losing his life in the process. Talk about a badass way to go out. But it's time to dive into the much darker side of superpowered society. These characters are the bad to evil. First up, we have an umbrella entry for the Nomu. Nomu are basically corpses that have been repurposed by All For One and the Doctor with various quirk factors to make them straight up fighting machines. While this means that the Nomu are literally embodiments of carnage and destruction, it's worth noting that Nomu don't really have minds of their own. So while they're undeniably dangerous, we can't exactly say that they're full-on morally evil. On a similar note is Gigantomachia, a villain who seems to only be able to follow the orders of his master. Think of him like a way bigger, way stronger, slightly more sentient Nomu, which really isn't a ticket to anything but a lower spot on our list. He might not be a flat-out supervillain, but Kotaro Shimura isn't much better. There are some pretty crummy parents in the world of MHA, but few compare to Tenko Shimura's father. Kotaro was the son of Nana Shimura and was reasonably devastated by his mother placing him into foster care at a pivotal age. This led to him growing an intense hatred of heroes, a hatred he passed down to his son through both verbal and physical abuse. Kotaro showed his true colors even more clearly when he saw a distressed Tenko destroying his family by accident due to the manifestation of his decay quirk. Rather than trying to calm his son down or anything of the sort, Kotaro whacks him in the face like he's a monster, and little did he know, that would turn him into one. Even though he's ranked a little lower, Kurogiri is frankly a better father figure to Tenko, or as we should call him now, Homura Shigaraki. Kurogiri might initially seem like little more than the sidekick to the main villain, and even if that were where his character ended, given that he's more than willing to endanger the lives of children in his evil schemes, his placement here would still be warranted. That said, we should probably point out that Kurogiri is actually a Nomu, specifically one made of the corpse of Aizawa and Mike's high school friend Shirakumo. While they aren't able to fully get through to him, Shirakumo does offer the two some invaluable information that helps them kickstart the first war against the Post-Liberation Front. Shame he ends up remaining loyal to Shigaraki in the end anyway. Everybody's favorite Ninja Turtle Stain cosplayer, Spinner, is next. In a society full of people with all kinds of superpowers, it's only natural that some are going to have mutant appearances. Spinner is one such example, and tragically he's one of the many who suffered from mutant quirk-related racism. Sadly, unlike Shoji, this didn't result in Spinner working to become a hero who could fight to right some of society's injustices. Rather, when he gained an admiration of Stain, Spinner decided that killing people was the best way to combat injustice in society. To his limited credit, Spinner probably has the least problematic convictions in the League of Villains. Racism is bad is a pretty universal message, so good on him for that. He's also a pretty loyal friend to the League, especially Shigaraki, wholeheartedly devoted to supporting the League even when others have their own priorities. Before the final war, he even checks on Shigaraki when he's in distress from his transformation, showing the most concern for him out of any of the League. Hide your veins, boys. Himiko Toga is up next. Toga is definitely one of the series' most tragic villainous figures. It's easy to forget that despite being guilty of some pretty intense crimes, including but not limited to mass murder, Toga is only a 17-year-old girl. She was born with a deep fascination for blood, which made drinking somebody's blood feel to her like a simple hug or hand-holding. In other words, the more she likes you, the more she's gonna want to stab you. This passion manifested itself into a unique quirk that allowed her to transform into anyone she drank the blood of, and tragically, rather than receiving the proper counseling as she desperately needed, Toga was called a freak by everyone around her, including, but again, not limited to, her own parents. Toga's story is a tragic one, not one that justifies killing countless people, mind you, but still a tragedy nonetheless. Like Spinner though, she does care about the League members. I mean, you saw the rampage she went on after Twice died. I'm definitely surprised that Hawks still has wings after that one. In a final moment of redemption during the last war, Toga thanked Uraraka for her compassion by giving her a blood transfusion, giving her own life to save her new friends. Thinking about what could have been is sad, but at least Toga got to show some compassion in her last moments. We have to give her some credit for that. Up next, we have a pretty great guy, Twice. He's the worst! This lovable Deadpool cosplayer is a chaotic buddy to the League of Villains, defined by an unstable mental state and a steadfast devotion to his friends. Twice is pretty friendly if you're willing to overlook the whole mass murder and national terrorist thing, not to mention the fact that he went insane due to some pretty tragic circumstances throughout his life. After resorting to a life of crime with the help of his clones to make ends meet, Twice was eventually witness to said clones massacring each other, left to wonder for years if he was even his real self. It's pretty hard to not feel bad for a guy like Twice. No, it isn't! But despite his deteriorating mental state, he was definitely present enough to know that murdering people is wrong. I mean, was getting betrayed by Hawks a soul-crushing moment? Absolutely, but he had a chance to turn himself in and reform, and he chose loyalty to his real friends. As tragic as it is, you have to respect his loyalty. I mean, even in the My Villain Academia arc, he was more concerned with saving villain broker Giran than anyone else, showing that, more than anything, he just wants to care for his loved ones. Twice might be a bad guy, but he's a great friend, and I'm more than willing to give him some credit for that. No credit for him! The last League of Villains member for now, Mr. Compress, is up next. Man, this guy, talk about being done dirty. With a versatile quirk, a cool design, and even a neat origin story about being the descendant of a legendary thief, Compress had the makings of a top-tier villain, but sadly he was more or less used as fodder in the war of Season 6. Compress made perhaps the greatest sacrifice any villain has made for their loved ones. He gave up his left butt cheek to escape from Best Genist's restraints, freeing the other captured League members in the process. Man, what a good friend you are, Compress. Shame that you're, like, you know, also a mass murderer and a child kidnapper, but there are plenty of people way worse than that in this series, if you can believe it. At least Compress doesn't default to violence as his strategy of choice. Heck, when Bakugo is kidnapped in Season 3, and I'm not defending him at all for that, Compress apologizes for the means he used to bring him there. He might be a criminal, but he's a polite one. You'll never be gentle criminal though, sorry Compress. This could be controversial, but we've decided to give the villain broker Giran a spot on our list closer to the bottom than most of his clients. It might be hard to see why, since unlike them, Giran isn't outright murdering people, probably, but nonetheless he's still actively profiting off the violent crimes of others. He even recruits mentally ill people, like Twice, which will ultimately lead him to his doom. And with that in mind, there's no telling how many others Giran has indirectly had a hand in slaughtering. He may only be a minor antagonist, but guys like Giran only amplify the already present dangers of superpowered society. For that, we have to place him pretty low. Former leader of the former Meta Liberation Army and alleged archenemy of Harry the Platypus, Redestro takes the next spot. It doesn't take being an expert on the series lore to conclude that Redestro is a bad guy. I mean, he actively supports the development of a society where people are able to use their quirks freely, for better or worse. That's bad enough just based on the sheer danger it poses, but then there's the scene from the manga that was, for some reason, completely excluded from the anime adaptation. Here, we see Redestro literally murder his colleague for disagreeing with some points in his book. The guy literally murdered someone he was apparently fond of because they had a different opinion. Man, imagine being that confident in yourself and still having your organization usurped by a mentally ill 22-year-old and later getting your leg redestroyed by a teenager. Ouch. But as bad as he is, I'd argue that one of his strongest allies, Skeptic, is far worse. On top of his involvement with Redestro, which undoubtedly led to a pretty long rap sheet on its own, Skeptic also has a cruel streak. He forced Twice to watch as his clones came dangerously close to killing him and Toga, using his trauma against him. The guy is on a whole nother level of cruelty, even by villain standards, and if you can't tell by that, things are about to get really rough. Starting off the basically pure evil category is one of many Tartarus escapees, the flesh-collecting serial killer Kunieda. Now, it's bad enough to be a serial killer who's evil enough to get thrown into the same maximum security prison as All For One, but to spend all that time in prison without remotely rethinking your depraved actions is even worse. Not to mention essentially bullying a child who was used as All For One's pawn for his entire life. I think I've made it clear that we don't accept Aoyama slander here, so Kunieda took the thin ice he was already on and deliberately stomped on it. Without further ado, we finally have the series' main antagonist, Tomoda Shigaraki, the man with motivations to destroy absolutely everything. Shigaraki was deeply warped by his childhood trauma. Not only did he have to deal with the whole accidentally murdering his whole family thing, but he had to deal with complete and total rejection from society. When civilians and heroes alike failed to reach out to the suffering child, the only hand left was that of All For One, and the hands of his deceased family members, which AFO decided this child should put on his body as accessories. Given that his sole motivation for living is destroying everyone and everything he can, the Shigmeister has to land pretty darn low on our list, but I won't deny that his story is an incredibly tragic one, more due to the failure of the adults around him than Shigaraki himself. He does express some loyalty to his allies, even suggesting that he believes they should be able to live their lives full of the things they love, despite his desire to destroy everything. Shigaraki might be a near-heartless monster, but he at least cares about his friends. The same, unfortunately, can't be said for Dabi, aka Toya Todoroki. Calling Toya worse than Shigaraki might be a bit controversial, but as right as he was to hate Endeavor for how he mistreated him, Toya still dedicated his entire life to getting revenge. Despite having one of the most utterly justified reasons to hate someone I've ever seen, Toya still manages to reach a level of pettiness that earns him the Wrath Sinner medal. He deliberately planned for years to commit heinous crimes and ally himself with powerful villains with the ultimate goal of destroying Endeavor and society's faith in hero society as a whole. What makes Toya worse than the rest of the league is his lack of loyalty though. By his own admission, everything he does is for the sake of crushing Endeavor's spirits. Even when Twice died, Dabi openly admitted he was only sad because it meant Twice wouldn't be able to help him achieve his own goals. He's also more than willing to murder Shoto, his own little brother, if it means seeing a look of despair on Endeavor's face. If it weren't for his tragic origin story, he'd be even lower, but Dabi has earned at least a little bit of sympathy from us, which sets him apart from most of the characters below him. Landing just outside of the bottom 5 is Kai Chisaki, aka Overhaul. I feel like any spot outside of the top 3 is being too nice to this guy, but the sole reason he isn't lower is because, unlike everyone beneath him, he does have some redeeming qualities. When he was taken in by the Shia Hasaikai boss, he wanted to repay the old man's generosity, so he pitched a lucrative business opportunity to regain power over the general area. When his boss disapproved, Overhaul, being a delusional narcissist, decided to use his quirk to hospitalize his adopted father and use his granddaughter's blood to make quirk-destroying bullets. Man, that escalated quickly. While he initially justifies this by saying he wants to cure the disease of quirks, it's later revealed that he plans to use Eddie's body to make a serum later on, creating a monopoly on quirks. A plan remarkably similar to a certain wannabe demon lords. A master plan like that deserves the Greed Sinner medal, and it would deserve an even lower spot if it weren't for the fact that Chisaki does actually show remorse for what he did to his boss, begging Midoriya to take him to him so he can apologize properly. Of course, he doesn't show remorse for what he did to Eddie, which was significantly worse, so man, why isn't he lower, right? Well, the thing is, while Overhaul is a complete scumbag, he does technically have something adjacent to a conscience, which is more than we can say for our bottom 5. Well, when it comes to desecrating bodies, Dr. Ujiko has a leg up on even Overhaul. Being the main one responsible for creating the Nomu, duplicating quirks, and empowering All For One, Ujiko is perhaps more guilty than anyone else of aiding All For One's maniacal deeds. He's also desecrated countless corpses with zero remorse, and even when he's captured, he expresses joy when he realizes that All For One's plans are slowly but surely coming to fruition. And it only gets worse from here, folks. Near the end of the list is 9, the main villain of Heroes Rising. In terms of morality, 9 is basically what would happen if you put Overhaul and Redestro in a blender. Like the latter, he wants a society based solely on power. Those with powerful quirks are free to use them as they see fit, and he's even more direct than Redestro in his conviction that this means that survival of the fittest is a totally fine framework for society. As for why he's ranked quite so low, like Overhaul, he isn't shy of endangering children in his schemes either. Not only does he try to take Katsuma's quirk, but he even goes as far as to threaten his sister Maharu's life if he doesn't comply. Both of whom are very young children, mind you. His only redeeming quality is his loyalty to his allies, but that's really not exactly a cheat code for a higher spot. The Bronze Medal of Evil goes to Flexed Turn. His quirk deflects whatever he's hit with, which sadly includes good things. When people tried to get close to him, Flexed Turn would inadvertently push them away, which transformed him into the warped psychopath he is today. His ultimate goal? Well, that's simple. He wants to release a drug called Trigger into the atmosphere via many bombs, which would mutate the quirks of those born with them to such an extent that their bodies are utterly destroyed. In other words, Flexed Turn is literally trying to commit the genocide of everyone who has a quirk, all because his quirk caused him some trouble. How does that fix anything, dude? Even if you look at this like Overhaul's plan, where at least he's trying to cure society, dude, you're literally just killing people. What does that accomplish? This isn't making you money or anything. If you want to kill people, then at least have the decency to say that. He could learn a thing or two from Muscular, who wins our Silver Medal of Evil. Muscular, if absolutely nothing else, is an honest guy. His hobbies include killing people, murdering people, beating the crap out of them, and every so often slaughtering them. If you can't tell, Muscular loves killing people. He just wants to cause as much bloodshed as he can, be it hero, villain, or innocent child. If it breathes, Muscular wants to make sure it can't anymore. He really is the embodiment of sheer carnage. Muscular doesn't have anything even adjacent to redeeming qualities, basically seeing people as nothing more than ragdolls. The only thing that could be worse than that is if he had some kind of ultimate plan for said ragdolls. Now with that said, let's not waste time now. We all know the Gold Medal of Evil can go to none other than All For One. But first, this video is brought to you by Wicked Binge channel memberships. You can gain access to our videos early before anyone else, plus gain access to members-only emojis and loyalty badges by supporting the channel through a membership. Seriously, nobody's surprised by this, right? I don't see why you would be. All For One is a complete and utter monster with no redeeming qualities. Taking in a vulnerable orphaned child would be a good thing under normal circumstances, but All For One's adoption of young Tenko was not meant as an act of altruism. Rather than helping him through his trauma, All For One harnessed the horrors Tenko went through to mold him into a destructive villain. That is, until he was strong enough. At that point, All For One would take over his body and most of his mind, using him as a puppet to fulfill his twisted goal to become the world's demon lord. Oh yeah, and on that note, if you somehow weren't convinced already, Season 7 proves that All For One is the absolute epitome of evil. Not only does it reveal how he manipulated the Aoyama family into working as his underlings against their will, but as Yuga reveals, his ultimate goal is to become the only man with access to quirks, so that, when the economy inevitably crashes, they'll only be able to come to All For One for help. All For One sees people as disposable tools, no matter how close they are to him. Even his younger brother, the only one he seems to express any sincere love towards, was used by him at the end of the day. Muscular might be a complete psychopath, but All For One takes that disregard for human life and pairs it with a plan to rule the world with an iron fist, earning him one of the easiest gold medals of evil we've ever given out. But remember, plus ultra.